They called it the most shameful wedding in Kansas history. A judge's daughter marrying a German prisoner of war in a secret ceremony while American boys were still dying overseas. The town gathered with torches the night they found out, but what they didn't know about the groom would change everything. When the German prisoner walked into Judge Hartwell's courtroom, no one expected him to quote Hemingway, or to make the judge's daughter question everything she believed about the enemy. The afternoon sun slanted through tall windows, casting long shadows across wooden benches packed with townspeople. Outside, gold star flags hung in windows along Main Street, silent reminders of sons and husbands who would never come home. The air inside the courthouse was thick with heat and barely contained anger. Emma Catherine Hartwell sat in the second row, her Red Cross volunteer pin fastened neatly to her collar. At 22, she had already lost 3 cousins to the war. Her youngest brother, Thomas, was missing somewhere near Bastogne. Emma had come today out of duty to see what the enemy looked like, but when the door opened and 2 military policemen escorted the prisoner in, she felt her certainty waver. Friedrich Weber was 26, tall and lean, his Wehrmacht uniform faded and patched. His hands were cuffed in front of him, but he walked with steady composure. Judge Hartwell adjusted his glasses and read from the papers before him. "State your name and rank for the record." The prisoner straightened. "Friedrich Weber, corporal, captured near Kasserine Pass, North Africa." Then he did something no one expected. He spoke in English. Not broken, hesitant English, but the clear, confident speech of someone who had lived among Americans. "Your Honor, I understand this is a labor assignment hearing. I'm trained as a civil engineer and willing to work in whatever capacity you deem appropriate." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Hartwell leaned forward. "You speak English?" "Yes, sir. I studied at the University of Chicago from 1936 to 1939. Structural engineering. I have friends in Evanston and Milwaukee. I know Wrigley Field. I've read Steinbeck and Hemingway." Emma blinked. This wasn't the monster she had imagined. The propaganda posters showed Germans as savage, twisted figures with cruel eyes. The man standing before them quoted American authors and spoke of baseball stadiums. Judge Hartwell cleared his throat. "You'll be assigned to the Morrison Farm, 10 miles west. Agricultural labor, supervised detail. You'll report daily to the camp sergeant." "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." As the MPs turned to escort him out, Friedrich's eyes swept the gallery one last time. For just a moment, his gaze met Emma's. She saw something there she hadn't expected. Not hatred or contempt, but a profound human sadness. The same sadness she saw in her own mirror every morning. The door closed. The courtroom exhaled. But Emma sat frozen, wondering what it meant that the enemy suddenly looked so much like a man. Emma Hartwell had lost 3 cousins to the war. Her youngest brother was missing in action near Bastogne. The last thing she expected was to care whether a German prisoner ate breakfast. But here she was, 3 weeks later, standing outside Camp Bellwood with a crate of donated books. The Red Cross had assigned her to deliver reading materials every Thursday. The camp sat on the edge of town where the wheat fields began. No watchtowers, no searchlights. Kansas held more than 50 prisoner of war camps by 1944. The logic was practical. America needed farmhands. German prisoners filled the gap. A sergeant waved her through. Inside, men in faded uniforms played cards. Someone strummed a guitar. Emma carried her crate to the small library, a converted supply shed. That's where she found him. Friedrich Weber stood near a window organizing books by the author. When he saw her, he straightened. "Miss Hartwell." She set the crate down. "You remember my name. Your father is the judge, and you were wearing a Red Cross pin." He gestured to the books. "Are these donations?" "Yes, mostly novels, some technical manuals." He lifted a worn copy of The Grapes of Wrath, handling it like something precious. "Steinbeck. I read this in Chicago. The Jodes reminded me of farmers I knew in Bavaria before everything changed." Emma felt the familiar stab of guilt. How could she stand here discussing literature with someone whose countrymen were fighting her brothers? Yet his voice carried no propaganda, no hatred. just quiet loneliness. "You studied in America," she said carefully, "for 3 years. I wanted to design bridges, then I was called back, conscripted." He paused. "There were things I saw during the war, Miss Hartwell. Things I did that I cannot speak of yet. Some I'm ashamed of. Others I would do again, even knowing the cost." The weight of those unspoken words hung between them. "I brought Hemingway, too," she heard herself say, "for whom the bell tolls. Hemingway understood war. He knew it destroys the good along with the wicked." A guard called from outside. Emma turned to leave, but at the door she hesitated. "Fräulein Hartwell, your kindness is not forgotten." She walked back through the gate, the Kansas wind pushing against her coat, wondering why gratitude from the enemy felt more genuine than praise from her own town, and wondering what secrets a German soldier carried that made his eyes look so haunted. If you want to find out what secrets Friedrich carried from the war, and how far Emma will go for love, subscribe to our channel so you never miss these incredible true stories from history. It started with books, Hemingway, then Twain, then Whitman. By autumn, they were sharing things neither had told another soul. Emma's Thursday visits had become routine. She arrived with donated volumes and walked to the library shed where Friedrich waited. The guards barely glanced at her anymore. A judge's daughter delivering books seemed harmless enough. The conversations deepened fast. Friedrich mentioned his studies in Chicago, his work at an architecture firm, the way a bridge must balance tension and compression. "I wanted to build things that connected people," he said. "Instead, I helped build fortifications." Emma understood that longing. She'd once dreamed of studying journalism, of writing stories that mattered. But her mother had been clear. Nice girls from good families didn't go chasing careers. She told Friedrich this one afternoon. He listened without judgment. "You speak of your life as though it's already written, as though you have no pen." The words struck deep. For weeks afterward, she thought about them while folding bandages, while serving Sunday dinner, while pretending to care about Robert Preston's letters from the bank. By September, something had shifted. One afternoon, Friedrich showed her a bookmark he'd carved from scrap wood. He'd sanded it smooth and burned words into the surface with a heated nail. Walt Whitman's verse, "I am large, I contain multitudes." "For you," he said, placing it in her palm, "because you contain more than this town will let you be." Emma's fingers closed around it, the wood still warm from his hands. She should have refused it, but she slipped it into her pocket and carried it home. That same week, Mrs. Schaffer drove past the camp just as Emma was leaving. She noticed how long Emma's visits had become. The next Sunday at church, Mrs. Schaffer mentioned it to Mrs. Patterson. But in a town like Bellwood, casual observations had a way of becoming dangerous. Emma didn't notice the whispers yet. She only knew that Thursday afternoons had become the hours she felt most like herself. Next Thursday, she would tell him what his friendship meant to her. Mrs. Schaffer saw them first. Emma Hartwell, standing too close to the German boy near the camp. Fence, laughing like old friends. Within a week, the entire town was watching. It happened on a Thursday in late October. Emma had finished her delivery and was walking back when Friedrich called to her through the fence. They stood separated by wire, discussing Whitman's verse. To Emma, it felt innocent. To Mrs. Schaffer, peering from her automobile, it looked like treason. By Sunday, the whispers had spread through Bellwood like prairie fire. At church, women leaned close in the pews. Her brothers are fighting those people, and she's bringing them books like they're guests at a library social. Emma felt the stares. When she returned home, her mother was waiting. "People are talking, Emma." "People always talk, Mother. Not about us. Not about Hartwell." Her mother's voice cracked. "Thomas is missing. And you're making friends with the enemy?" That evening, Judge Hartwell called her into his study. He didn't shout. He simply looked at her over his reading glasses. "I trust your judgment, Emma, but in a town like this, appearance matters as much as truth, perhaps more." The stakes grew higher when Robert Preston returned on leave. He arrived in his crisp banker's suit, already talking about setting a wedding date. He kissed Emma's cheek while her mother beamed, but when Robert held her hand, she felt nothing, just the cold certainty that marrying him would be a slow fading, a life of propriety and emptiness. 2 days later, Emma found Friedrich at the Morrison farm where his work detail was mending fence posts. She shouldn't have been there, but she needed to see him away from watching eyes. They stood in the tall grass as the autumn wind pushed clouds across the enormous sky. Friedrich looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "When this war ends," he said quietly, "I want to stay. For you." Emma closed her eyes, feeling the impossible weight of those words. She had a choice to make, and the town would never forgive either path. March 1945. The war in Europe was ending. Emma had two choices: marry the man her town expected, or marry the man she loved in secret. Germany was collapsing. Friedrich had received word that his family's neighborhood in Munich was nothing but rubble. His parents were gone. He had no home to return to. Emma made her decision on a cold morning in early March. She walked into Robert Preston's office and handed him back his grandmother's ring. "You're refusing me? For what? That German?" She didn't answer. The town erupted. A broken engagement was scandalous enough, but Emma Hartwell throwing away a respectable match for a prisoner of war? It was unforgivable. Her mother wept. Her father grew silent, but Emma had made peace with the cost. What she didn't know was that Friedrich had been making plans. The camp chaplain, Father Michael O'Brien, had been watching their devotion for months. When Friedrich approached him, explaining he could apply to remain in the United States if he had an American sponsor, Father O'Brien listened carefully. "You'll need someone to guarantee your character." "I was hoping you might consider it, Father." O'Brien studied him. He'd counseled hundreds of prisoners. Friedrich Weber was different, thoughtful, kind, genuinely remorseful, and clearly deeply in love. "I'll do better than that," O'Brien said. "I'll marry you." The ceremony took place on a Sunday evening in the camp chapel, a small wooden structure that smelled of pine and candle wax. Friedrich in his cleanest uniform, Emma in her mother's old cream-colored dress, Father O'Brien with his worn prayer book. Mrs. O'Brien served as witness. The guard on duty was Corporal James Murphy, a man who'd lost his brother at Normandy but somehow still believed in mercy. When Father O'Brien asked him to look the other way, Murphy nodded and walked to the far end of the compound. Emma's hands trembled as she took Friedrich's calloused fingers in hers. No music, no flowers, no family. Just two people standing in candlelight, promising forever in whispers. "Do you, Friedrich Wilhelm Weber, take this woman?" "I do." "Do you, Emma Catherine Hartwell, take this man?" "I do," Father O'Brien smiled. "Then by the authority vested in me, and in the sight of God, I pronounce you husband and wife." Friedrich slipped a ring onto Emma's finger, a simple band he'd fashioned from a silver coin, smoothed and polished over weeks of patient work. They kissed, gentle and reverent, while Mrs. O'Brien dabbed her eyes and Father O'Brien closed his prayer book. By the law of God, if not yet the law of man, Emma Hartwell became Emma Weber that evening. And when she walked out into the cold March night, she felt no fear, only certainty. Would you have had the courage to do what Emma did? To marry the person you loved knowing your entire community would turn against you? Let us know in the comments below. Emma made one mistake. She wore the ring. For 2 weeks she'd kept the silver, for 2, band hidden on a chain beneath her blouse, but on a warm April morning in Henderson's general store, she forgot. The sun caught the metal as she reached for a jar of preserves. "My word, Emma, is that a wedding band?" The store went quiet. 3 other women stopped their browsing. "Yes," Emma said, "but you broke your engagement to Robert Preston. Who on earth did you marry?" "Friedrich Weber." The jar slipped from Mrs. Henderson's grip and shattered, spreading sticky red across the wooden boards. Within an hour, the news had detonated through Bellwood. The judge's daughter married the German prisoner. By supper, everyone knew. Judge Hartwell was in his chambers when the town council arrived. 5 men in dark suits. "Your daughter married the enemy, Robert, while our boys are still fighting." The judge sat very still. Emma had told him the night before. My daughter is 22 years old. She made her choice. This town won't stand for it. Judge Hartwell looked at them with tired eyes. Then the town will have to sit. That evening, they came to the Hartwell house. 30, then 50, then more. They gathered on the lawn as the sun set. Someone threw a stone that cracked against the porch railing. The smell of kerosene from torches mixed with evening air. Inside, Emma's mother sat weeping. Her father stood at the window, an expression carved from granite. The Red Cross had dismissed her that afternoon. We cannot have someone of your moral character representing our organization. At church that Sunday, women Emma had known her entire life crossed to the other side of the aisle. Mrs. Schaffer announced loudly that she'd always suspected Emma was troubled. Too many books, too many ideas, but on that first night with the crowd on her lawn, Emma walked onto the porch. She stood in the last light of day, the silver ring gleaming on her finger. Someone shouted, "Traitor!" Emma's voice cut through the noise. "I married a good man. I will not apologize." The crowd surged forward, but Judge Hartwell stepped beside his daughter. Father and daughter stood together as darkness fell and the people of Bellwood slowly dispersed, their anger unspent, their judgment absolute. They stayed. That was the part the town couldn't forgive. When the war ended in May, Friedrich had no family left, no home to return to. His parents were gone, his neighborhood flattened. America was the only future he had. Father O'Brien helped him navigate the bureaucracy. The U.S. military was offering residency to certain prisoners with American sponsors. Friedrich's fluent English, his education, and the chaplain's testimony opened the door. By late summer, his status changed from enemy combatant to legal resident. He was free. But freedom in Bellwood looked nothing like liberation. Friedrich and Emma rented a small house on the edge of town, the only landlord willing to take their money. Emma's mother wouldn't speak to her. Her father shook Friedrich's hand once, stiffly, then retreated into silence. The cruelty came in relentless doses. Hendersons refused to serve them. The butcher turned them away. They drove 20 miles for groceries. Children threw rocks. Threatening letters arrived. Then, one September morning, old Thomas Morrison appeared at their door. He needed help repairing a grain silo. "I pay $3 a day. You do honest work, you get honest wages. Don't care what the town thinks." Friedrich worked that job for 2 weeks. Morrison never smiled, but at the end of each day he counted out the payment in full. It wasn't friendship, but it was fair, and that was rarer than gold. Judge Hartwell faced his own pressure. The town council demanded his resignation. He refused, but the cost was distance. To protect his position, he stopped visiting Emma. Friedrich found work as a day laborer when he could. His engineering degree meant nothing. Emma took in sewing, mending clothes for women who would pass garments through intermediaries. One cold November afternoon, Father O'Brien appeared with a basket. Bread, butter, preserves, a small chicken. "You've shown more courage than most people manage in a lifetime. Don't let them break you." After he left, Emma stood in the kitchen and cried, not from despair but from gratitude. They lived on almost nothing, but they were together. In the evenings, Friedrich read aloud while Emma stitched by lamplight. That night, Emma found Friedrich replacing a broken window pane he'd finally saved enough to buy. "I have lived through war," he said. "I can survive this." Emma watched him make their small house whole again. Tomorrow they will face the town, but tonight they had warm bread, a mended window, and each other. 2 years after the wedding, a letter arrived from Germany. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Emma opened it at the kitchen table. The paper was thin, the words written in careful English. "Dear Mrs. Weber, you do not know me, but I knew your husband before the war. My name is Ruth Steinberg. I was his neighbor in Munich." Emma's hands began to shake. Ruth explained she'd been searching for Friedrich for 2 years, trying to find the man who saved her family. In 1942, when the deportations began, Friedrich had hidden Ruth, her mother, and her younger sister in his family's cellar for 6 months. He brought them food, falsified papers, and helped them escape to Switzerland. He told us he could not stand by while innocent people suffered. Your husband saved 3 lives, Mrs. Weber. I wanted you to know the kind of man you married." Emma sat in silence, tears streaming. This was the secret he'd hinted at. Friedrich had never mentioned this. When he came home that evening, she handed him the letter. He read it slowly, then folded it and set it down. "You never told me." It was simply what needed to be done. The next morning, Emma carried the letter to the Bellwood Gazette. The editor, Harold Chen, had been quietly sympathetic. When Emma showed him Ruth's letter, something shifted in his eyes. "This is a story that needs telling." The article appeared 3 days later. Local resident saved Jewish family during war. Harold Chen wrote plainly about Friedrich's actions, the risk he'd taken, the lives preserved. That Sunday at church, Emma watched the reaction unfold. Mrs. Henderson read the article twice, then stared at the pew, saying nothing. Her husband whispered, "Well, I'll be damned." Old man Patterson stood during fellowship. "I was at Dachau when we liberated it. If this German saved even one Jewish family, he's got more honor than half the men I knew who wore our uniform." But Mrs. Schaffer hissed, "Propaganda. Don't believe a word." 2 families nodded to them as they left. A veteran shook Friedrich's hand awkwardly. It wasn't much, but it was something. The most profound change came Tuesday evening when a car pulled up. Judge Robert Hartwell stepped out and walked to the door. "He'd been silent for 2 years," Friedrich answered. The judge extended his hand. "I should have done this long ago." They shook. Then the judge pulled Friedrich into an embrace. Emma appeared and saw her father's shoulders shaking, tears running down his face. "Forgive me. Forgive a stubborn old man." Inside, over coffee, the 3 talked until the stars came out. And slowly something that had been broken began to mend. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that courage can look like quiet kindness and that one person's compassion can ripple across generations. By 1952, Friedrich Weber had been in America for 8 years, and he finally got to build a bridge. Judge Hartwell, using what remained of his influence, had quietly advocated for Friedrich with the county engineer's office. When a project opened up to design a crossing over the Republican River, the judge made sure Friedrich's credentials were reviewed fairly. The county offered him the contract. It wasn't grand, just a 2-lane span to replace an aging structure. But to Friedrich, it was everything. The chance to practice his profession, to create something that would connect rather than divide. Emma stood beside him at the groundbreaking ceremony. Some townspeople attended, others stayed away, grudges intact. The division remained. But Emma and Friedrich had learned to live with partial acceptance. Their son had been born the previous autumn. Robert Friedrich Weber came into the world healthy and squalling. Judge Hartwell had been the first visitor at the hospital. When the nurse placed the baby in his arms, he'd whispered, "Robert. You named him Robert." "After the best man I know," Emma had said. The judge had wept then, all the grief and regret of 7 years pouring out. Now, watching Friedrich consult blueprints, Emma felt profound arrival. The bridge took shape over the summer. Steel beams rose. Friedrich was there every day, measuring, calculating. When the bridge opened in September, there was no grand ceremony, just a ribbon cutting. But as the first cars crossed, Friedrich stood watching with deep satisfaction. That evening, he spread the final blueprints on the kitchen table. "We built our own bridge first," Emma said. He looked up, understanding in his eyes. They had built it out of love and defiance and patience, a bridge between enemy and neighbor, between past and future, between hatred and hope. And it still stood. But across town, in Judge Hartwell's study, another bridge was being built, one that would only be discovered years later. When Judge Robert Hartwell passed away in 1959, they found something unexpected in his desk drawer. The funeral filled the courthouse square. He'd served Bellwood for 32 years. When a man like Judge Hartwell left the world, people noticed. Emma sat in the front pew, Friedrich beside her, their 3 children quiet and solemn. Robert was 13, tall and serious. The twins, Catherine and Michael, were 8. After the service, while sorting through her father's papers, Emma found a wooden box. Inside was a photograph she'd never seen. Her family, taken the previous Christmas. Beneath it lay letters, dozens, all from Friedrich, addressed to Judge Hartwell over 13 years. Dear Judge Hartwell, I wanted to update you on the Morrison barn renovation. Also, Robert took his first steps yesterday. Emma says he has your determination. Another. The bridge project is progressing well. I think of you often, grateful for the opportunity you created. Thank you for believing in me when few others would. Her father had kept every letter, had carried them to work, hidden but present. He'd supported them privately even when public loyalty required distance. At the funeral reception, Emma asked to speak. My father taught me many things, but the most important lesson came late in his life. He taught me that changing your mind is not a weakness, it's wisdom. She told them about the letters, about the grandfather who'd held his grandchildren close while maintaining the necessary fiction of distance, about a man who'd learned to see past uniforms to the human heart beneath. Some wept, others nodded. A few still held their judgment, but even they listened. By the early 60s, Friedrich had become a respected civil engineer. He designed schools, renovated buildings, and mentored young engineers. Some people had grown to appreciate him. Others grew accustomed. A few never forgave. One afternoon in 1963, 10-year-old Robert came home with a bloody nose and torn shirt. A boy had called his father a Nazi. Robert had defended him with his fists. Friedrich sat his son down and cleaned the blood from his face. What did you tell him? I told him you saved people during the war, that you're a good man. Friedrich pulled his son close. You don't have to fight my battles, Robert. Yes, I do. You're my father. Emma watched from the doorway. Their children understood. They knew their father's story, knew what it meant to carry complexity, and they were proud. The bridge Friedrich built still stands today. In 1973, the county added a small bronze plaque. It reads, Designed by Friedrich W. Weber, Engineer 1952. Travelers cross it every day, most never noticing, never knowing the story of the man who built it or the town that nearly broke him. Emma Weber passed away in 1986, Friedrich 2 years later. They're buried together in Bellwood Cemetery, their shared headstone bearing both names, equal and intertwined. Some people still leave flowers, though few remember why. The town never fully forgave them, but Emma and Friedrich forgave the town, and that, in the end, was enough. Because the greatest victories aren't won through vengeance or vindication. They're earned in the quiet grace of living well, loving deeply, and building bridges that outlast hatred. Stories like Emma and Friedrich's remind us that courage often looks like quiet defiance, and that love can build bridges even hatred cannot destroy. In a world that demanded they choose sides, they chose each other, and in doing so, they showed us that the most powerful form of resistance is sometimes simply refusing to hate. The bridge Friedrich built over the Republican River still stands today, carrying travelers who will never know the story of the man who designed it or the woman who stood beside him when the entire town turned away. But perhaps that's fitting. The greatest acts of courage are rarely celebrated in their time. They're simply lived day by day with quiet dignity and unwavering love. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We uncover these forgotten moments of history every week, stories of ordinary people who did extraordinary things when the world demanded they choose sides. Stories of love that defied borders, friendships that crossed battle lines, and small acts of kindness that changed the course of lives. Because history isn't just about the famous names in textbooks. It's about people like Emma and Friedrich, who proved that even in our darkest hours, humanity can prevail. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.